Well, the war in Israel started when terrorists poured in from Gaza for a rampage of murder, rape, torture, and kidnappings that shocked and revolted most of the world. But to understand how we got to this point and who these Hamas terrorists are, we have to go back to the formation of Israel and the origins of the conflict. Because by 1947, 1948, a lot of Jewish immigrants had already moved into British-controlled Palestine. After the horrors of the Holocaust as well, the world moved to create a nation for the Jewish people. So the United Nations came up with a plan to divide British-controlled Palestine into two states, an Arab state and a Jewish state called Israel. Well, Jews accepted this, but the Palestinian Arabs did not accept it. And then other Arab nations and Israel went to war over this, and Israel prevailed and seized parts of the Arab-drawn state along the way. And then fast forward to 1967, they fought the Six-Day War, in which Israel prevailed again, and Israel pushed beyond its borders again to capture more land from Arab nations, including taking the West Bank from Jordan and the Gaza Strip from Egypt. Well, the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank violently resisted the Israeli occupation and clashed with the Israeli settlers who moved in and started building homes there. And then a group called the PLO formed to represent and fight for the Palestinians, and it carried out terrorist attacks along the way.
What happens to the men aboard the aircraft?
The men are being kept as hostages until our prisoners are released.
Although the passengers were spared, the planes were not. This was how cameraman Haji Dalal recorded the scene from a distance of only 300 yards.
But a group of terrorists in Gaza said the PLO was not extreme or violent enough, and that group is called Hamas. It formed in the late 1980s and has been firing rockets into Israel and using suicide bombers and carrying out other gruesome acts ever since. Well, by 2005, Israel decided to withdraw from Gaza. And 1 year later, the Gazans held elections and chose Hamas to lead them. Hamas then controlled Gaza and expanded its reign of terror. And then Israel put up a wall and blockade around most of it, except, of course, the narrow border Gaza shares with Egypt. And then last year, tensions between the Palestinians and Israelis grew as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu encouraged more Jewish settlements in the West Bank, and terrorists stepped up their attacks, and Israel stepped up its raids to find the terrorists.
Palestinian militants are firing on these soldiers. They have to move from house to house in order to avoid that fire. And it's a difficult job, but they have to clear this area. It's part of the task in tonight's operation.
But again, that was playing out in the West Bank, not the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. So while Israel and much of the world media focused on the bloodshed to the west, Hamas was planning something much bigger under the radar to the east, and U.S. and Israeli intelligence just missed it.
Hamas has shown itself to be an enemy of civilization.
Hamas had knocked out cameras and sensors where they were planning the attack, creating blind spots and surveillance, and suspecting that Israel was listening on their calls, they staged conversations in which they discussed why they claimed to be unprepared to attack just before they did.
This attack was a campaign of pure cruelty, not just hate, but pure cruelty against the Jewish people. And I would argue it's the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust.
Now, if you're wondering where Hamas got all those weapons and rockets, well, that would largely be Iran, a leading state sponsor of terrorists since 1979. Iran also supports a terrorist organization based in Lebanon called Hezbollah. Now, Hamas and Hezbollah had been rivals, with one being Sunni, the other Shia, and each taking different sides in the Syrian civil war. But they do share a common benefactor with Iran and a common hatred of Israel and the West. Now, Hezbollah militants are already striking Israel from its border with Lebanon, and that could be a prelude to a mass assault that could expand the war with Israel to a second front to the north and possibly even a third front to the northwest with the militants in Syria. But for now, Israel is pounding Gaza to try to take out some of Hamas' war machine before Israel may decide to move in with tanks to try to wipe out Hamas.
And just as ISIS was crushed, so too will Hamas be crushed.
But while Hamas is greatly outgunned, wiping it out won't be easy, because that would require urban warfare in a city with a network of tunnels controlled by Hamas in one of the most densely populated areas of the world that Hamas knows inside and out. Also, where terrorists could blend in with a civilian population of more than 2 million people. Which also means there are a lot of innocent Palestinian civilians who could get caught in the crossfire, and also hostages, of course, from Israel and the United States and beyond, held somewhere in Gaza, assuming they're still alive. And this leads to one of the greatest challenges Israel has ever faced, which is saying a lot, and is putting the world to the test as we speak.